In the news tonight, Russia agrees to a 48-hour humanitarian ceasefire in the Syrian city of Aleppo as Turkey steps up an offensive against militants in a border town. The U.S. Secretary of State says he agrees with Gulf Arab states and the United Nations on a plan to restore peace talks in Yemen with the goal of forming a unity government. And the death toll from a devastating earthquake that struck central Italy nears 150. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. Prime Minister Hani Molki welcomed Managing Director and Secretary General of the Board of the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund. They discussed scopes of cooperation between Jordan and the Saudi Fund, including future plans to activate joint economic projects that have been agreed upon by the Jordanian and Saudi governments. A memorandum of understanding was signed on investment promotion between Jordan and Saudi Arabia in the attendance of the Prime Minister, His Majesty the King's Special Envoy to Saudi Arabia, and the Aqaba Special Economic Zone Authority Chief Commissioner. The memo, which was signed by the Jordan Investment Fund and the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, aims to promote and increase Saudi investments in the kingdom in the energy, tourism and infrastructure sectors. The agreement is part of ongoing cooperation between the two kingdoms and reflects their interest to further boost joint investments in the various economic sectors. Amman and Riyadh announced a package of measures in April to enhance bilateral cooperation. Interior Minister Salam Hamad said his ministry will provide all assistance and facilities to Palestinian pilgrims heading across Jordan for the Hajj in Saudi Arabia. Hamad told Palestinian Minister of Awqaf and Religious Affairs Youssef Daes that the Palestinian issue has always been a top agenda priority for the Hashemites. He said border crossings have taken all necessary measures to receive the Palestinian pilgrims and provide services to them at the start of the journey of faith. The Palestinian minister commended Jordan's honorable and historic position toward the Palestinian cause. He also pointed to efforts being exerted by the kingdom to preserve Islamic and Christian holy sites in Palestine and provide aid to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The White House said it supports the United Nations efforts to bring humanitarian relief to the divided Syrian city of Aleppo and would welcome Russia's constructive engagement. Rebels and the Syrian army have also agreed a deal to evacuate all residents and fighters from the besieged Damascus suburb of Daria. A rebel leader there said the evacuation would start tomorrow and last for 2 or 3 days. Turkey, meanwhile, sent more tanks into northern Syria and demanded Kurdish militia fighters retreat within a week. Turkey seeks to secure the border region and divide or drive back Daesh with its first major incursion into its neighbor. This report has more.
Russia has agreed to a 48-hour humanitarian pause in the Syrian city of Aleppo to allow aid deliveries. UN officials said security guarantees are awaited from other parties on the ground.
We are very much focused in maintaining our line. We want a pause for 48 hours. The Russian Federation replied yes. We will wait for others to do the same, but we are ready. Trucks are ready and they can leave any time we get that message.
De Mistura has been trying to bring government and opposition representatives back to the negotiating table this month to revive the shattered ceasefire and end the war. He said he awaited tomorrow's meeting between U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Sergei Lavrov in Geneva before commenting further. In the stepped-up Turkish offensive, at least 9 more Turkish tanks entered northern Syria as part of an operation aimed at driving Daesh out of the border area around Jarablus and stopping Kurdish militia fighters from seizing territory. Plumes of smoke rose from Jarablus a day after Syrian rebels, backed by Turkish special forces, tanks and warplanes, entered one of Daesh's last strongholds on the Turkish-Syrian border.
For cleansing Daesh from our neighbor countries, both in Syria and Iraq, we will provide any necessary contribution. We are supporting operations in those regions that you mentioned, from Afrin towards the east, and we will give any necessary support to the operation, which will start from Jarablus. Besides everything, it is important for our security.
Turkish forces carried out a controlled explosion in the Turkish border town of Karkimesh. Dogan News Agency reported the explosion was part of an operation to clear landmines that were planted by Daesh there. Hala Debabne for the news at 10.
France's President François Hollande called for the resumption of negotiations to bring a political solution to the conflict in Syria. Hollande spoke to reporters after a meeting with European social democratic leaders and after the publication of a UN report which found that Syrian government troops were responsible for 2 toxic gas attacks. A joint investigation by the United Nations and the Global Chemical Weapons Watchdog also found that Daesh militants had used sulfur mustard gas.
There are today forces which don't want a peaceful solution, nor a political transition. We now have proof brought by the United Nations that the Syrian regime used chemical weapons. We knew it back to 2013, and you know the position I took. And we also got confirmation even after 2013. That's what the report says. It is also true that Daesh also used chemical weapons, probably similar ones to that of the regime.
The Iraqi army has dislodged Daesh terrorist group from the Qayyara oil-producing region located south of the de facto capital Mosul. The army last month captured the Qayyara air base, which it plans to use as a hub to support forces advancing on Mosul. Daesh has lost this year about a half of the territory it captured in the past 2 years in Iraq in battles against government and Kurdish forces backed by US-led airstrikes. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider Abadi hopes to defeat the group by capturing Mosul, the largest city under its control in both Iraq and Syria. The Qayyara region produces heavy crude and has a small refinery to process some of the oil. As the army geared up for the assault on Mosul, Iraq's parliament impeached Defense Minister Khalid al-Ubaidi over corruption allegations, removing him from office. Ubaidi, an ally of Prime Minister al-Abadi, had spearheaded the military campaign against Daesh. 2 lawmakers said parliament voted to withdraw confidence from Ubaidi after questioning him about weapons contract. He denied any wrongdoing. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said he agreed in talks with Gulf Arab states and the United Nations in Saudi Arabia on a plan to restart peace talks in Yemen with the goal of forming a unity government. UN-sponsored negotiations to end 18 months of fighting in Yemen collapsed this month, and the Iran-allied Houthi movement there resumed shelling attacks into Saudi territory. Speaking at a news conference with his Saudi counterpart Adel Jubeir in the Saudi city of Jeddah, Kerry said the conflict had gone on too long and needed to end. Kerry said the Houthi militia must cease shelling across the border with Saudi Arabia, pull back from the capital Sana'a, seize their weapons and enter into a unity government with their domestic foes. Yemen's internationally recognized government based in Saudi Arabia has made similar demands but insisted that the Houthis fulfill all those measures before any new government is formed. However, Kerry suggested they could move ahead in parallel.
We agreed on a renewed approach to negotiations, with both a security and political track simultaneously working in order to provide a comprehensive settlement. The final agreement, however, in broad outline, would include in the first phase the swift formation of a new national unity government with power shared among the parties, the withdrawal of forces from Sana'a and other key areas, the transfer of all heavy weapons, including ballistic missiles and launchers, from the Houthis and forces allied with them to a third party.
The death toll from a devastating earthquake that struck central Italy reached at least 241 people. Officials said they expected to confirm more deaths as the search operation continued. Many of those killed or injured by the 6.2 magnitude quake were holidaymakers in the 4 worst hit towns. More in this report.
There's an urgency now to rescue operations underway in central Italy, like this one in Amatrice, where a young girl was pulled out alive after spending more than 15 hours buried under rubble. But hope of finding more survivors diminishes by the hour. Overnight, the death toll in Wednesday's 6.2 magnitude quake rose sharply to nearly 250. In Arquato del Tronto, the sun rose Thursday to a harsh new reality for residents now sleeping in relief tents.
I have lived through many earthquakes in the years. Every 7 or 8 years there's an earthquake here, but one like this one, never. It was long and ugly.
And officials warned the recovery phase 2 in Arquato del Tronto might be long and ugly. The once picturesque hillside town is essentially gone. Officials think the death toll will continue to rise, surpassing Italy's last bad quake in 2009, which claimed 300 lives. Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has told the Italian people, tomorrow we can talk of reconstruction. But this, he says, is a day for tears.
It's said to be the world's first weather station to date back more than 2,000 years and to have been used by merchants to tell the time even in darkness. The Tower of the Winds, still standing on a slope on Athens' ancient Acropolis hill, despite attempts by Lord Elgin to move it to Britain, has been restored and reopened to the public for the first time in nearly 200 years. The greatest mystery remains how the clock worked at night. Based on the most prominent theory, a hydraulic mechanism powered a water clock device with water flowing from a stream on the Acropolis hill. Renowned jetpack pilot Eric Scott shot out of the water and navigated his jetpack above a lake in what has been described as the first water stunt of its kind. Scott performed the 21-second long feat at Lake San Cristobal in the U.S. state of Colorado. Although jetpacks have been existed for decades now, Scott's stunt highlights how the gadget's technology has evolved. "100 children gathered at the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building Square to create a giant formation of the Tokyo 2020 Paralympic emblem and mark 4 years to go until Games take place. Tiles forming the shape of the Olympic emblem were rearranged into the Paralympic emblem. Japan hopes the Olympic will spur its economy, which is struggling to escape decades of deflation. The IOC selected 5 new sports in early August, including baseball, skateboarding and surfing, to feature in the Tokyo Games in an attempt to attract a younger audience. And finally, the weather forecast: fair conditions in most regions for the rest of tonight and relatively hot in the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea. Hot weather will prevail across the kingdom in the next 2 days, with a high of 35 degrees in Amman. Winds will be northwesterly moderate to brisk, lifting dust in the Badia region. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a very hot day tomorrow, with a high of 39 degrees, northerly winds and somewhat choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to close here our top stories once again, Russia agrees to a 48-hour humanitarian ceasefire in the city, or the Syrian city of Aleppo, as Turkey steps up an offensive against militants in a border town. The U.S. Secretary of State says he agrees with Gulf Arab states and the United Nations on a plan to restart peace talks in Yemen with the goal of forming a unity government. And the death toll from a devastating earthquake that struck central Italy nears 150. And with that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Luay Balkar. Thank you for joining us and have a lovely weekend.